The restaurant glowed with warm lights, its chatter and clinking silverware filling the air with a hum of ordinary life. To most, it was just another Friday night. But for Emily Carter, sitting nervously at a small table near the window, it was supposed to be more than that. It was supposed to be a chance. Emily, just 26, had learned long ago that the world could be cruel to those who were different. Born deaf, she had lived her entire life in silence. Where others laughed freely or struck up conversations without a second thought, she had always been on the outside, piecing together meaning from lips that moved too quickly, expressions that shifted too subtly. Despite her hearing aids and her patient reading of lips, there were always gaps. Gaps filled with embarrassment, with apologies, with people looking away too soon. She smoothed the hem of her modest dress, her fingers trembling as she adjusted her notepad on the table, the one she used when her signing wasn't enough. Tonight was a blind date, arranged through a mutual acquaintance who promised, "He's kind. He'll understand." She had wanted to believe it. She had wanted to believe she was worth understanding. Across from her sat Ryan, tall, confident, perfectly styled in a crisp button-down. From the start, Emily had seen the flicker of disappointment in his eyes when she had waved hello in silence instead of speaking. He had smiled politely, but it hadn't reached his eyes. She tried. She really did. She gestured softly, used the notepad to ask him questions about his work, his hobbies, even his favorite food. But Ryan's responses were clipped, his gaze wandering to the bar, to his phone, to the laughter spilling from other tables. He glanced at her lips when she tried to speak, then sighed impatiently when she didn't get his words right. Finally, after barely 20 minutes, Ryan pushed back his chair with an exaggerated scrape. He grabbed his phone and muttered, too fast for her to catch every word, but enough to read on his lips. "This is ridiculous." "I can't do this," Emily's breath caught. She stared at him, willing her eyes not to sting. She signed quickly, desperate, "Please, I'm trying." But Ryan wasn't looking. He had already turned, shaking his head as he tossed a few bills on the table. He walked out without a backward glance. Emily sat frozen, her hands trembling in her lap. The room felt louder, crueler, as if every laugh and every clink of glass was aimed at her. She bit her lip until it hurt, staring down at the untouched plate of pasta in front of her. The stares, she could feel them. People noticed. She imagined what they thought, poor girl. How pathetic. No wonder he left. Her chest ached, heavy with the familiar weight of rejection. She had been here before. Jobs that turned her away, friendships that faded when patience ran thin, dates that ended before they began. Tonight had been her chance to feel normal, to feel wanted. Instead, it was just another reminder. She didn't belong. But what Emily didn't realize, what her lowered gaze kept her from seeing, was that someone else in the restaurant had noticed. At the table just across from hers, a man sat with his daughter, a little girl of about 8. His jacket was worn, his hair slightly disheveled, but his eyes, steady and kind, had watched the entire scene unfold. His name was Daniel Hayes, a single father, a man who knew what it meant to be dismissed, to be overlooked, to be judged before being understood. He had seen too many doors close in his own life, too many struggles that nearly broke him. And now, watching Emily's silent tears slip down her cheek, he felt a familiar ache in his chest. He couldn't stay silent. Not this time. He leaned forward, his daughter watching curiously, and slowly raised his hands. Emily felt movement in her peripheral vision. She glanced up, her blurred eyes focusing on the man at the next table. Her breath hitched when she saw what he was doing. His fingers formed deliberate shapes, sign language. She blinked in disbelief as his hands moved again. "You deserve better." For the first time that night, Emily's lips parted not in apology, but in shock. Someone saw her. Someone spoke her language. And that single moment, a stranger's kindness signed across a table, would change everything. The restaurant noise seemed louder now, each burst of laughter and clink of glass cutting through Emily's chest like a knife. Her fingers trembled as she pushed the half-filled glass of water away, her reflection rippling in the dim light. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the booth so no one would have to look at her. But she couldn't vanish. Not from the stares, not from the memory of Ryan's words, not from the way her own heart whispered lies. Maybe he's right. Maybe no one will ever want you. She shifted in her seat, wiping her cheek quickly with the back of her hand. The motion was small, but Daniel noticed. His daughter Lily followed his gaze curiously, whispering softly, "Daddy, is she crying?" Daniel gave a gentle nod. "Yes, sweetheart. She's had a hard night." Lily tilted her head, innocence shining in her eyes. "Like us?" Her words pierced Daniel deeper than he expected. Yes, like them. Like the countless nights he had come home with bills he couldn't pay, with a little girl who asked for toys he couldn't afford, with memories of a wife he had buried too young. Like the times he had felt invisible in a world that valued money over humanity. He turned back toward Emily, watching her shoulders curl inward. He could see her fighting to make herself smaller, to hide her pain. Daniel leaned forward again, his hands moving carefully. "You are not alone." Emily blinked, her eyes darting toward him. Her breath caught in her throat as she realized he was signing again. Slowly, shakily, she raised her own hands. "You know how to sign?" Daniel nodded, his expression calm, his movements steady. "A little. My wife taught me. She used to volunteer with the deaf community." Emily's chest tightened at the mention of his wife, but the warmth in his eyes made her tears spill faster. She hadn't expected anyone, especially a stranger, to cross the invisible line that separated her from the rest of the world. Her hands hesitated, then shaped words she rarely shared with anyone. Why are you being kind?" Daniel glanced at Lily, who sat beside him coloring quietly with the crayons the waiter had given her. Then he looked back at Emily. "Because I've been where you are. Different struggle, same feeling. Invisible, unwanted. I won't let you believe that tonight." Emily's lip quivered. She lowered her gaze, ashamed. "He didn't even give me a chance." Daniel's hands moved again, deliberate and strong. "That's his loss, not yours. Don't carry his blindness as your burden." The words struck her like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Still, the ache remained. "It always happens. People see me, then they leave. Always." Daniel took a slow breath, his jaw tightening as he thought of the sacrifices he had made for Lily. The nights he had chosen hunger so she could eat. He understood rejection, abandonment, and the cruelty of people who never saw beyond the surface. And so, without thinking twice, he did something he hadn't planned. He stood. Emily's eyes widened as he moved from his booth and walked to her table. For a moment she panicked, worried he might pity her, worried this attention would turn into another wound. But when he reached her table, he didn't look at her with pity. He looked at her with respect. He signed again, slower this time, his eyes steady. "May I sit?" Emily hesitated, then gave a tiny nod. Daniel slid into the seat across from her, his movements quiet but firm. Lily followed, clutching her crayon box, sliding in beside her father as though this was the most natural thing in the world. The waiter paused nearby, confused. Daniel pulled out his wallet, placing enough cash on the table to cover Emily's meal. "Together," he said aloud, speaking slowly so she could read his lips if needed. Then with his hands he signed again. "No one eats alone tonight." Emily's throat tightened. No one had ever said words like that to her before. The sacrifice was small, a man giving up his own booth, his own quiet meal with his daughter. But to Emily, it felt monumental. It felt like the first time someone had chosen to stand beside her instead of turning away. Her fingers shook as she signed, "Why do you care?" Daniel glanced at his daughter, then back at her. His expression softened. "Because one day, someone will treat my little girl the way he treated you. And when that happens, I hope there's someone willing to stand up and remind her she's worth more." Emily's tears flowed freely now, but they weren't the tears of shame she had known minutes ago. They were tears of something different, something she hadn't felt in a long, long time. Hope. For the first time that night, Emily felt the tension in her shoulders ease, if only slightly. Daniel's presence at her table was unexpected, yet strangely comforting. He wasn't staring at her like others did, with pity, with confusion, or with impatience. Instead, he looked at her as though she was a person worth listening to, worth understanding. Emily took a small breath, her hands hesitating before moving carefully in the air. "Most people don't know how to sign," Daniel's fingers replied, a little slower than hers, but clear enough. "I'm still learning. My wife taught me before she passed. She said everyone deserves a voice." Emily's gaze softened. She wanted to ask, "She's beautiful," Emily signed. her lips forming the words at the same time. Daniel's expression warmed. Thank you. She's my whole world. His hands moved again. Her name is Lily. Emily managed a small smile, though her eyes still shone with unshed tears. You're raising her alone? Daniel gave a slow nod. His voice was quiet but steady. Yes, it's not easy, but she reminds me every day that the fight is worth it. Emily lowered her eyes, her fingers tightening around the edge of the table. I wish someone thought of me that way. The confession slipped out before she could stop it. Her chest tightened, ashamed of how broken it sounded. But Daniel didn't flinch. He didn't look away. Instead, he leaned forward, his hands lifting again with deliberate certainty. You deserve better. The words were the same he had signed earlier, but now they carried more weight, more intention. His gaze was steady, his voice silent, but his meaning thundered through her heart. Emily's hands trembled as she shaped a reply. Why do you believe that? Daniel's lips curved into the faintest smile. He gestured toward Lily. Because I would want someone to say the same to her if she were sitting where you are. Because kindness costs nothing, but it can change everything. For a moment, Emily couldn't breathe. No one had ever spoken to her like this. Not with pity, not with obligation, but with a conviction that reached straight into her soul. Her eyes blurred again, but this time with a different kind of ache. Not the ache of rejection, but of longing for this to be real, for someone to actually see her. She lifted her hands, hesitant but brave. People always leave. Daniel's jaw tightened. He thought of the empty side of his bed, of the promises he had made to a woman he lost too soon, of the countless times he had been told he wasn't enough. He understood abandonment in his own way, so he answered honestly. Then the wrong people left, but that doesn't mean the right ones won't stay. Emily swallowed hard, the words sinking deep. She wanted to believe them. She wanted to let herself imagine a world where she wasn't always the one left behind. Just then, the waiter came by, glancing between the tables awkwardly. Is everything okay here? He asked. Daniel gave a nod, speaking clearly while his hands signed for Emily. Yes, everything's fine. The waiter looked skeptical, but didn't press. As he walked away, Emily realized something. Daniel hadn't just spoken for her. He had translated the world so she didn't have to feel left out. Her lips trembled as she formed the words, softly but with sincerity. Thank you. Daniel simply shook his head, signing again with firm clarity. Don't thank me. Just believe me. You deserve better. For the first time in years, Emily allowed herself to smile through her tears. It wasn't wide or carefree, but it was real. Lily noticed and grinned, holding up her drawing. Look, she said proudly. Emily leaned closer. The crayon picture was simple. A man, a little girl, and a woman sitting at a table under a glowing yellow light. Emily's breath caught. The little girl had drawn her into the picture. Tears spilled freely down her cheeks. She looked at Lily, then at Daniel, her heart pounding. For the first time in her adult life, she felt like she belonged somewhere, even if it was just at a stranger's table on a stormy night. And though she didn't know it yet, that moment, that single act of inclusion, would become the turning point in a story far bigger than she imagined. The restaurant had quieted as the evening wore on. Tables emptied, leaving only the soft hum of dishes clattering in the kitchen and the muted rhythm of rain against the glass. But at that small booth near the window, the world felt impossibly full of words without sound, full of truths finally breaking free. Emily sat with her hands folded tightly in her lap, her fingers aching from how hard she was gripping them. She wanted to speak, but the fear of what would come out, the fear of being dismissed again, kept her frozen. Daniel watched her carefully. He recognized that look, the way someone's eyes fought not to drown while their body went still. He had worn that look himself more nights than he cared to count. Finally, Emily lifted her hands, her movement small and hesitant. I'm tired. Daniel tilted his head, waiting. Tired of trying. Tired of being different. Tired of hoping it will get better when it never does. Her hands dropped, her chest rising and falling quickly. Her face crumpled as she whispered aloud, her voice rough and barely audible. People like me don't get happy endings. The words hit Daniel like a punch. For a moment, his own walls threatened to crumble. He thought of the years since his wife's death, of nights when he had wondered if Lily deserved better than a father who could barely keep them afloat. He had lived inside that same hopelessness. He leaned forward, his voice low, his hands deliberate as he signed, "You're wrong." Emily's eyes widened at the firmness of his reply. Daniel's jaw clenched as he exhaled sharply. Then he spoke the words he had kept buried for too long. "After my wife died, I thought my life was over. I was drowning in bills, in grief, in loneliness. I thought Lily deserved a better parent than me. I thought maybe she'd be better off without me at all." Emily's breath caught. She had never expected him to admit something so raw, so broken. His hands moved again, slower now. But every morning she looked at me like I was her whole world. And I realized, even broken, even struggling, I could still be enough for her, and that was all that mattered. His eyes locked with Emily's, his voice steadying. "Don't you see? You think you're unworthy because people have treated you that way, but their blindness doesn't define your worth. Your life isn't over. You're still here, and that means your story isn't finished." Emily's lips trembled. Her tears fell faster now, splashing onto her hands. She shook her head weakly. "But what if no one stays? What if I'm always left?" Daniel leaned closer, his face etched with quiet strength. His hands rose again. "Then I'll say it until you believe it. You deserve better. And if they leave, it's because they couldn't see your worth. That is their loss, not yours." Emily's body shook with sobs she couldn't contain. Years of rejection, loneliness, and silence seemed to pour out of her all at once. She covered her face with her hands, ashamed of falling apart in front of a man she had just met. But then, she felt a small tug at her sleeve. Emily lowered her hands, blinking through tears. Lily stood beside her, holding out the crayon drawing again. This time, the little girl pointed to the woman in the picture. "That's you," Lily said with a shy smile. Emily gasped softly, her heart clenched, overwhelmed by the simple purity of being included, of being drawn into someone else's world instead of being pushed out. Her gaze flicked to Daniel, who was watching her with quiet intensity. He didn't rush her. He didn't pity her. He simply let her feel. And in that moment, Emily realized something. This man, this stranger who had signed just a few words to her, had given her more dignity in one evening than most people had in her entire life. She looked at him, her eyes raw but filled with something new, not despair, but possibility. For the first time in years, she wasn't just surviving another rejection. She was beginning to believe she might be worthy of more. The rain outside softened into a gentle drizzle, streaks of water glistening on the diner windows like silver threads. The once crowded room was nearly empty now, only a few patrons lingering over coffee. But at that booth near the window, time itself seemed to have slowed. Emily wiped her face with trembling hands, embarrassed at how vulnerable she had been, yet strangely lighter than she had felt in years. For so long she had carried her pain in silence, folding it neatly away so no one could see. Tonight it had spilled out, but instead of shame she felt seen. Daniel leaned back slightly, giving her space, but his presence was steady, unshaken. He had witnessed her breaking point without turning away. That more than anything made her feel safe. Lily slid into the seat beside Emily without hesitation, her small voice breaking the quiet. "Do you want to color with me?" she asked, holding out a crayon. Emily blinked, surprised. A soft laugh escaped her lips, and the first real laugh in a long time. She took the crayon, her hand brushing Lily's small fingers, and nodded. For a few minutes the three of them sat together, drawing simple shapes and silly figures on the paper placemat. The world outside the diner, with all its harshness and rejection, faded away. Here, in this fragile bubble of warmth, Emily felt something she had nearly forgotten: belonging. She glanced at Daniel, her hands moving hesitantly. "Why are you helping me? You don't even know me." Daniel's eyes softened as he signed back, slow and clear. "Because kindness doesn't require history. It just requires choice." The words sank deep. She had always believed love and acceptance were luxuries she might never earn. Yet here was a man who had given both freely, not because she had proven herself, but simply because she was human and hurting. Emily's throat tightened. Her hands shook as she signed again. "But what if I fail? What if I'm not strong enough?" Daniel leaned forward, his expression firm yet gentle. Her heart broke and healed all at once. Emily looked back at Daniel, her lips curving into the smallest but truest smile. For the first time in years, she let herself believe she wasn't destined to always be left behind. Maybe, just maybe, her story wasn't over. The waiter came by quietly, placing the bill on the table. Daniel reached for it, but Emily stopped him with a gentle shake of her head. Her hands moved, signing with newfound strength. "Let me. Tonight you've already given me more than money can buy." Daniel studied her for a moment, then nodded with respect. He didn't argue, didn't diminish her gesture. He let her choice stand. As Emily paid, she felt a strange peace settle over her. A peace born not of a fairy tale romance or a miraculous fix, but of something deeper. The knowledge that kindness still existed, that worth could be seen even in broken places. When they stood to leave, Daniel held Lily's coat, helping her slip into it before pulling on his own worn jacket. Emily gathered her bag, her movement steadier than before. At the door she hesitated, turning to face him one last time. Her fingers signed, "Thank you, for everything." Daniel's reply was simple, but his gaze made it powerful. "Don't thank me. Just remember, you deserve better." Emily smiled, her tears shining like jewels in the neon light spilling through the doorway. She stepped out into the damp night air, the drizzle cool against her skin, but her heart was warm. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel invisible, and as she walked into the night, the lesson lingered, not just for her, but for anyone who had ever felt unwanted, unseen, or unloved. One act of kindness can remind a broken soul that they were never worthless.